How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to the Stupid Questions podcast. We got another installment for you today. We're going to be talking with Bob Babbitt from Babbittville, from so many other things. He is a triathlon Hall of Famer in the sport, and that's only been held by 47 people, amongst those like Scott Tinley, Mark Allen, Jan Frodeno, those kind of guys. He was in the fourth class of 11. Anyway, amazing guy, entrepreneur, loves people, co-founder of the Challenged Athletes Foundation, which is an amazing organization that you should definitely go check out. But today, just get to dive into a little bit of who he is and all he's done. I didn't even have to ask that many questions. He is such a walking encyclopedia of history, and especially as it pertains to our sport. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Mr. Bob Babbitt. Mr. Bob Babbitt, thank you so much for coming on, for willing to jump in with me and let me ask you some questions. I guess you're probably used to interviewing most everybody that I've ever met, but yeah, thank you so much for jumping on. I'm really excited to get to chat with you.
Thanks, Ev.
Yeah. So where are you from? Where are you at right now?
We're in Carlsbad, California, just north of San Diego.
Okay, nice. Is like you're originally from around that area, San Diego area?
No, I'm originally from Chicago. Moved out to San Diego in 1978 to become a PE program at a little private school for a number of years. And that led to L78 and then went to do Ironman in 1980. And that pretty much changed my life.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to jump into all that. Chicago, were you born and raised there?
I was born and raised there. Born and raised in Chicago, and went to University of Illinois, and then worked in Chicago for a number of years, and got tired of the weather and came out to the West Coast.
Yeah, I can imagine. What kind of work did you do? I guess prior to maybe even like back in high school. Like, what were your first jobs when you were growing up?
Oof. You know what? I ran as a lifeguard at a pool in Chicago, 2000 Lakeshore Drive, like a high rise, and was a lifeguard there for 8 summers, and then worked at a residential treatment center for emotionally disturbed kids up in Lake Villa, right on the border of Illinois, Wisconsin, and did that for a number of years before coming to San Diego to run a PE program at a little private school.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. So do you have siblings?
I have a brother who's 10 years older and a sister who's 4 years older. So yeah, as the baby of the family. And I think by the time parents get to the third one, you're sort of on your own. It was a lot of fun.
A little more relaxed and chill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have kids?
I do not. No. I got a lot of challenge athlete kids, but didn't get married till I was 46, and didn't really want to be that the dad that the kid brings to school for show and tell, who's drooling on themselves when they're 70-year-old dad coming to school. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
My wife and I were both whole teachers, and I felt that with Challenge Athletes Foundation, with all the kids we work with, we have a lot of great kids in our life.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like you've obviously done a lot with sport, and you mentioned a couple of times like you made the move across the country to, I guess, work in a PE program, but that desire to kind of get into the sporting realm or what people can do with their bodies, where did that come about? Like, how old were you, do you think, when you first got introduced to that world that interested you?
You know what I loved about sport, and grew up in a town called Wilmette, north of Chicago, and I was that kid who was sort of the organizer, right? So I'd come to your house and go, "Hey, Seth, we're going to be playing baseball. Meet out in front of the Geyer's house in 20 minutes," and you'd say, "Well, who else is playing?" And at that point, I had nobody else. You were the only guy, but I'd say, "Well, I got Johnny and Jimmy and George, and they're all playing." And so then it was okay for you to come. Then I have to go to their houses and go, "Hey, well, Seth's coming." Okay, cool,
Yeah.
I'll come. It was one of those things that it's funny because it's something you start as a little kid, and it sort of played its way with gosh, with when I got into the business side, is hey, we've got ads in the magazine, and I've got Gatorade in, and we need to get others, and it just is one of those things.
Mm.
Sort of the coordinator, the organizer, the hey, let's go make something happen. Because the average kid is like, I'll just sit in the house, watch TV. And when you come and say, hey, we're going to go play baseball, well, I don't want to be alone. Who else is playing? That was sort of a light bulb moment for me when I realized that you can get people, you once you get everybody there, everybody's going to have a great time. But getting them there is always the trick. And from starting when we started Challenge Athletes Foundation with Ironman, it was something when I first finished Ironman in 1980, there was something about that event that I knew was special. And starting the magazine, starting a radio show, all those type of things was, how do I get more people involved? How do I get more people connected? You get more people connected, you get more sponsorship, you grow a sport. We weren't just growing our own businesses back in the day with early days of Competitor and Triathlete and all the other publications out there. We were growing a sport. We were trying to grow the sport of triathlon, and we were all sort of working together. Dan Empfield at Slow Twitch and myself and John Duke at Triathlete. It was all about, if we make this sport successful, then we all are successful. And that's what it was all about. We weren't really competing with each other. It was exciting when someone got a new advertiser, when Gatorade became involved in our sport. It was like, oh my God, that's a national brand. Well, that worked out for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. So it sounds to me like you have this multifaceted approach to life. I would describe you partly, at least, from this based on this conversation, that you are entrepreneurial. Is that a trait that is more of nature to you or nurture?
I think it's who I am. I think I've always been entrepreneurial, always felt like, how do I create? I like the creative side of things. How do we make things different? How do we, with Ironman, if you look back, it was when I first did Ironman, I was like, why am I get the kids at my school involved? So created the first Iron Kids Triathlon was at my school, and it was running and an obstacle course and swimming, and they got a little. The trophy was a bank. I drive down to Tijuana, down to the border, and buy these plaster banks, Incredible Hulk banks. Put Incredible Hulk with a log over his head, and had a slot for where you drop your coins in. But every kid got the Incredible Hulk thing, and that was a cool thing. They did this little triathlon thing, this Iron Kids thing, and now they were into the sport. They didn't know what the sport was before, but they got this cool prize because of it. So they liked it. And so when I look back at from the Ironman days, from a series I created called Muddy Buddy, all of those things, Challenge Athletes Foundation, all those things are, you're small, you're nimble, be creative. Anybody with a huge company with huge resources, you can do stuff. But how do you do it when you don't have dollars, when you don't have funding, when your first print bill is $20,000 and you have $17,000 in the bank? That's to me is what it's all about. Is how do you create something from nothing? And I think that's what we've tried to do all these years.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of things, lots of achievements, obviously, and kind of the chicken before the egg scenario. When you were growing up, was the making something out of nothing a way of life for your family? Was that something that you watched be emulated before you?
I think a couple things. My dad and his three brothers, they had an auto parts store that my grandfather had started in the 1920s called Babbitt Auto Parts. And I saw the hard work. My dad, they closed. They were never closed. The only day they ever closed was my grandfather's funeral. And so the four brothers, my dad one year would he'd get Christmas Day off and he'd get Memorial Day off. And then the following year he'd get like, basically you take out very little time off. I remember my dad at 6 a.m. getting ready to go to work, coming home at 6 p.m. And my mom, what always hit me with my mom is she was one of the original folks with a charity called Infants Aid. And I would see her working on her charity. And so I think those things really stuck out to me from my parents: work ethic and giving back to others. That was always important for both of them.
Yeah, for sure. So you had, obviously, it sounds like very good role models, a lot of really neat life experiences, putting on little events with your friends when you were younger, as in like the baseball and things like that. And that grew and crescendoed into obviously everything you've done from the Challenge Athletes Foundation and Competitor Magazine and other things, which I'm going to ask questions about. But I'm curious from your perspective, if I was to ask you the question, who is Bob? How would you answer that?
Who's Bob? Oh my God. Bob is a creative guy who is very inquisitive and is very curious about other people. This is actually came to light for me because a close friend of ours, Bill Walton, the NBA Hall of Famer, just passed away, and he's a huge supporter of CAF. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what made Bill special. What made Bill special is something I can relate to. Is he cared about other people. He cared. He wanted to know what made them tick, right? And most superstars hang out in VIP areas. Bill never did that. He was all about meeting people, and perfect Bill Walton story, and something that all of us should aspire to. Is we had a young man named Mac Johnson who fell off a patio back in Tennessee. His college-age kid fell off a patio, paralyzed from the waist down. And 6 months after he was paralyzed, Mom wanted to get him used to traveling with a wheelchair. So they flew down to Arizona, went to the NCAA basketball championships, national championships. And a couple of days later, they're at a Quiznos in a parking lot in Arizona. And at a gas station parking lot, who do they meet? But Bill Walton. And Mac rolls up to him in his chair and says, "Mr. Walton, sir, can we get a photo?" And Bill is, "Mac, what's your sport?" And Mac's like, "Well, Bill, I've only been injured 6 months. I don't have a sport yet. You need to come to San Diego, move into my house, and CF and I will find you a sport." This kid, stranger. How many celebrities invite a stranger to come to their home and move into their home, which is what Bill did on an everyday basis. And this young man, we got him into swimming, got him in a bunch of different sports. He fell in love with wheelchair basketball. Next thing you know, Bill makes a call, and Mac Johnson is playing at Auburn University. And that's what all of us need to aspire to: is how do you help people? How do you help people become their best version of themselves? Think about how many folks believed in Seth before Seth believed in Seth, right? Those people, that's what we need to be. We need to be believing in other people before they believe in themselves, and help them become the best version of themselves. That to me is if I aspire to anything, that's what I aspire to.
Yeah. So you've been a part of this sport of triathlon more than 25 years now then, is that correct? No, it's got to be more than that.
78.
Close to 40? Yeah, 19. Yeah, so February 18, 1978, I guess. Let's talk about that date. What does that date mean to you? And it's really awesome that you have, I think, a picture from that
That's from
day
79.
right behind you.
The picture behind me is from the 79. Wasn't a lot of photography from 78. But 79, Peter Reed Miller from Sports Illustrated was sent to cover that event a week or two after the Super Bowl. And so he's covering the biggest sporting event on earth. And then a couple of weeks later, he's sent to this event with 15 starters and 12 finishers. And he's standing in the dark road in the middle of the night. And this guy, Tom Warren, is on his way to winning the Ironman. And turned out both Peter and Tom went to USC. So as Tom comes out of the darkness, he's whistling the USC fight song. But that's when I think of that date, and Gordon Haller beating John Dunbar, and John Dunbar leading the race. And there's no aid stations. You had to have your own support crew. No roads were blocked. And this John Dunbar, Navy SEAL, is leading the race. And he runs out of water. His crew runs out of water. They have beer. He drinks beer. And Gordon catches him with about 10K to go in the race. He remembers Dunbar basically weaving along the streets because he'd been drinking beer, after working out for X number of hours. And Gordon Haller puts half an hour on him in the last 10K, ends up winning the first ever Ironman World Championship. And that day led to 79, which was, again, 15 starters and 12 finishers. But the difference was that year Sports Illustrated did that, 10-page feature on the Ironman with only 15 people in the race. And Tom Warren wins the race. And, that led to myself and my roommate at the time, a guy named Ned Overend, who went on to become one of the first inductees into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame, but mountain bikes hadn't been invented yet. He was a mechanic at San Diego Suzuki. So we read about this thing, this Ironman thing, and we got bikes at the police auction. Next thing you know, we're going to do this silly Ironman thing. And because of the article in Sports Illustrated, it went from 15 starters and 12 finishers to 108 of us in 1980. And if you look at the people who raced that year, it was, Dave Scott. It was John Howard, Dave Scott, 6-time champion. John Howard, cyclist of the 70s, 3-time Olympian, Pan American Games gold medalist. Myself, Kurt Madden, who's just still racing. I think he just qualified for Taupo this last weekend in Hawaii. So there's a lot of folks, and Dave McGilvery, who has been, ran the Boston Marathon, I think 45 or 50 times in a row. It's a pretty interesting cross-section of folks who did the race that year who are still involved intimately in the sport.
Yeah. So how, even before this, I guess before that first event started, kind of in the genesis of triathlon, when did that intersect with your path? Was there any type of swim, biking, and running happening prior to that conversation?
My swim, biking, and running happened when I moved to San Diego. And the San Diego Triathlon, which created the first ever triathlon in 74, they were putting on a number of different triathlons. The triathlons back then were just a workout for running. The real sport was running, and triathlon was just a workout. So they would have these events down at Fiesta Island that Ned and I would go down to. And actually, another person who would go and do those races was John and Judy Collins and their family. They lived in Coronado. John was based there. And when he moved to Oahu, and it was the big argument about who the fittest endurance athlete was, and that came about another article in Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated said Eddie Merckx was the greatest endurance athlete because he won the Tour de France 5 times. And so there was this perimeter relay around the island of Oahu, and John and Judy Collins and all their friends were doing this perimeter relay. And besides doing running events, they also did swimming events, and they did cycling events. You pretty much did everything. So they were at the, John and Judy were at this perimeter relay party where everybody was talking about, well, who's the fittest? Well, why is it the cyclist? Why isn't the runner? Why isn't the swimmer? And that's when John got up and said, hey, we're going to find out once and for all who the best endurance athlete is. We'll take the 2.4 mile Waikiki rough water swim, 112 mile around Oahu bike ride, and the Honolulu Marathon. We'll put them all together and we'll call the winner the Ironman. And then he promptly forgot about it. And then he had one guy who worked for him who kept saying, sir, when are we going to do that iron thing, sir? And so then on February 18th, 1978, he put on, along with his wife, Judy, they put on that first ever Ironman and changed everything.
Yeah. It's quite interesting to hear the birth of a sport, because if you try to think of a sport like golf or whatnot, I don't even know if there's a story. It goes so far back, but it's neat to have it kind of within grasping distance of at least my history.
Yeah.
So moving west for the first time, you decided you were going to do that, you said, because of a PE job. That's obviously a really big life move. My wife and I are right now considering moving across the country. So I know that there's typically a lot of planning and risk involved in that. So tell me about that story of finding that job, taking it, and all right, let's make it happen.
Not much planning. Yeah. I had driven out to the West Coast, and because I worked on a center for adaptive children, a residential treatment center back in Chicago, I drove out to San Diego, LA, San Francisco, and interviewed at residential treatment centers. My sister was teaching at San Diego, And San Diego looked like a pretty cool place to live, and especially after we had, I think, it was 60 below with a wind chill in Chicago for 3 straight weeks. And I was like, okay, it's time to get the hell out of here. And so basically just loaded up my little Opel Manta and with everything I owned and drove to the West Coast and got a job working at the private school my sister was teaching at and running a PE program that they call About Time, and got here and, was immersed in the San Diego Track Club and the triathlons, and then I fell in love with all these silly events, and it was a blast. And then we got our police auction bikes. We tracked down Town Warren, because it's not like he'd go online and figure out how to do this Ironman thing or how to get into the race. You sort of had to know somebody, and so we knew the guy who won because we had done his tug swim run swim event. Actually, I've got photos from that event you're laying behind me somewhere.
Oh, really?
But and Tommy was, he said, listen, you need a bicycle. So my bike was a $75 bike from a police auction. The whole back end had been charred in a fire, and I had flat proof tires. It had Radio Shack radio mounted on the handlebars. We had no clue what we were doing. In fact, I had 10-year sleeping bag and tent on the bike because I thought you swam 2.4, rode 56, camped out, and rode back the next day and did the marathon. It was a little bit of a shock when I found out that we were supposed to do the whole thing in one day. And then the night before the race, was it the night before? Yeah, the day before, they had a meeting. And again, it's supposed to be the Waikiki Rough Water Swim. And this was February, so the surf was huge. And it was breaking against the hotel we were standing in, the Grand Otani Hotel. And Med and I did all of our swimming in a 120 length per mile pool at my condo. And we're like, we're going to die tomorrow. Waves are breaking 10 feet up. There's no way we're going to live. So, we're basically resigned to the fact that this is our last day on Earth. And we walk into the meeting, and this guy, Hank, who was putting the event on, goes, hey, I got good news and bad news. Good news is ABC Wide World Sports happens to be on the island shooting cliff diving on Sunday. Bad news is, the bad news is, the good news is they can shoot us on Saturday, our events on Saturday. But last year we had to postpone the event a day because of the storm surf. And if we move to Sunday, I will lose ABC Wide World Sports. So we are moving the swim to Ala Moana Channel. It's going to be a 4-leg swim rather than Waikiki Rough Water Swim. And of course, Dave Scott, all the Navy SEALs, a lot of Navy SEALs did the event back then. What a pussy event. I can't believe you're moving the swim. You can't move the swim. And Ned and I like, yeah, can't move the swim knowing we're going to live. This is like the greatest thing ever. So, we go out there the next day. I've got my, bike with the Radio Shack radio. I've got number 3 because I sent my $25 in third. I wasn't seated or anything. And a long sleeve wool jersey. It was, we had, and Hawaiian sweetbread. I had like a pocket sewn in the back of my shirt, my jersey with loaves of Hawaiian sweetbread and Gatorade. My crew, as a school teacher in San Diego, one of the kids I taught, her dad lived on Oahu and had a Fiat convertible and 2 girlfriends. That was my crew. And I tossed them my Hawaiian sweetbread and Gatorade, and somehow got out of the water. When I got out of the water, and actually I'm swimming along, feels like 3 flat. I was swimming along. There was the one guy who had sponsorship back then, a guy named John Huckabee, 59 years old from New Jersey or something. And the guy had run the Athens Marathon back to back to back in one day. But he couldn't swim a stroke. No idea how to swim. So as I'm swimming down Ala Moana Channel on my way back, I almost run into Huck, who's walking the swim. Like I'm staying as shallow as possible, and Huck is walking and moving his hands through the water like he's swimming, right? He walked 2.4 miles. He's the only guy in history to get blisters on his feet during the swim portion of the Ironman World Championship. But they get out of the water, and this was an open park, so there's a guy and his kid in the shower, so I wait for them to get done and then take my shower and put on all my crap. And then as I'm riding out. I have flat-proof tires on the bike because I didn't know how to change a tire. I'm riding through Waikiki and tuning in my radio, and I had no idea I could swim 2.4 miles. And all of a sudden, mile 25, there's my crew on the side of the road with a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke, and a big old brown bag, which was awesome. Mile 90 was a root beer snow cone. Then when I came in at the end of the bike, I hear this music, and I see this boom box and a bamboo mat. My crew is like, how about a massage? I'm like, oh my God, my back is so tight. So I laid down for a 45-minute massage between a bike and a run, and then got up, and they had scales on the course. You had to get off your bike and in the run, get on the scale and get weighed. If you lost 5% of your body weight, they pulled you out of the race. Where the science came from, no idea. But so I finished, get my massage, get weighed, and now I'm eating Hawaiian sweetbread and staggering through Waikiki and get to about mile 5, and there's a scale. I get on the scale, and I can hear the guy in a walkie-talkie. He's like, can you give me that again? Guy gained 5 pounds. You can't gain weight doing this thing. So I'm waddling through Waikiki, and then we get to a point where we're running up Diamond Head, and then we're going to drop down to Kapolani Park and finish this thing. So as I'm running up Diamond Head, my crew is behind me in their Fiat convertible, lighting up the road. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the coolest thing. I thought this was going to take me 2 days if I ever did it. I've never done anything like this. There's going to be bands. There's going to be cheerleaders. I can't wait for a finish line. It's going to be really cool. I come running down the hill in the Kapolani Park, and there's a chalk line across the road and a light bulb up above me. And I sort of slow down, and I hear this guy in the dark that's like, hey, you. Yeah? You in the race? Yeah. You're done. That's it. I was like, one guy doing 1 hour push-ups to a park. No Mike Riley, no bands, no cheerleaders, nothing. But when I left the park and went back, well, Ned's wife, or girlfriend at the time, Pam, was his crew, and she lost him early in the bike ride and didn't find him till mile 90. And he was drinking out of sprinklers in the median strip when she found Ned. So I walk into a room we were sharing, and the moon is coming through, and his back is like the reddest red you've ever seen. And he's like, just rolls over, and he goes, I didn't see her all day. But it was an adventure. We didn't know what we were doing. But it was one of those things when I came back from that, there was a guy in town named Mike Plant who had a newspaper called the San Diego Track Club News. And he had recently changed it to Running News. And I convinced him to change it to Running and Triathlon News because of this 108 people who had just done this silly event on Oahu. This triathlon was going to get big. And it was a gut. I just knew it was. I left teaching. Mike hired me to be the LA editor. And I learned some of my major life lessons from Mike. Because what he told me early on is, first of all, I was putting on this Iron Kids triathlon at the children's school. And I called him up and said, hey, do you want to cover this for your magazine? And he goes, I got a lot going on. Why don't you cover it? I'm like, I've never covered anything before. I've never written anything before. Let's give it a try. So I wrote an article about, helicopters hovering over the start of the Iron Kids and all this fantasy. And he loved it. And he said, just write for me. So I created an old fart of the month, the running wino, the Reverend Camp Vignolo, minister of triathlism, and the Rev. So some of the stuff with the Rev, it was a picture of me in a priest outfit with a Bible and a collar and the whole bit. But it'd be like made up questions and answers. Like, dear Rev, I've been looking for a wetsuit. How do I find one that fits? Curious in Carlsbad. Dear Curious, what I do is I just wait outside a transition area. And when someone leaves who's about my size, I just take his home. Well, as you can imagine, people either thought that was hilarious or they're like, I can't believe you're encouraging people to steal other people's wetsuits. So Mike called me into his office, and remember, if you wanted to say something about something, you couldn't just send an email or a text or anything else. You had to write a letter, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, go to a post office. That was the world. And so Mike had this stack of letters, like 2 stacks. And he goes, these are people who hate you. And here's the people that love you and think you're hilarious. And understand that if people didn't give a shit, then they wouldn't write anything. That's called vanilla. You don't want to be vanilla. You're not vanilla. And that's what I love about what you're doing. Keep doing it. If people are passionate enough to write a letter take it to the post office, put a stamp on it, and send it in, then you're touching a nerve. If they didn't give a crap, if you didn't move them at all, they wouldn't do anything. So keep doing what you're doing and don't ever be worried about people being upset about anything. And, old fart of the month and running wine on, picture me in a garbage can with a wine. There was a lot of stuff that was pretty inappropriate, but it touched a nerve and people responded. And that led, eventually, I became LA editor for Running and Triathlon News. And then when that went out of business, I went to meet with two magazines in California. One was called Southwest Cycling and one was called California Bicycles. And I went to both of them and said, if we did a magazine that combined running, triathlon, and cycling, it could be really popular. And they both said the same thing. They both said, listen, we're into cycling. This triathlon sport is a fad. It'll be gone in 5 years. This is 87. And we don't give a shit about running. And we'd never put a skinny runner on the cover of a magazine. So I came back from these depressing meetings, and local friends came to us with a check for $17,000 and said, start your own magazine. And our first print booth was 20.
Wow.
And I was living on friends' floors for 3 years, but we loved it. We loved driving to LA and being in San Diego and covering these amazing athletes. There's something about the sport of triathlon that changes lives for the better. And if you look at the person coming across finish line in 1980 or someone come across finish line this past weekend in Hamburg, it's that same feeling. You have done something you didn't think you could do. You changed your perception of you. That's what our sport does. And so, a launch competitor in June of 87, Running a Triathlon News had run out of business in April of 87. So we had a 1-month hiatus and launched a new magazine, and then eventually grew that to 11 editions and 500,000 circulation. And then in 08, we became the Competitor Group, private equity firm from New York. Loved our brand, Competitor. And so we had Competitor. I had a series called the Muddy Buddy Ride and Run series, which is a fun story in itself. And then we had Competitor Radio. I went to the mighty 690 radio here in San Diego, which, they interviewed Magic Johnson and Wayne Gretzky. And I went to them and I said, listen, I've got a new magazine called Competitor. So I want to do a radio show called Competitors. And give me your worst time slot. What's your worst time slot? 8 to 10 on Sunday night. Perfect. I'll take it. What's it going to cost me? $500 a month. Okay, cool. And what I wanted was people to hear an interview with Wayne Gretzky and then hear an interview with Dave Scott or Paul W. Frazier and think, okay, if they're on a radio station, they must be important. This sport must be important. And so, I actually, until 2021, every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m., was Babbittville, and then was first Competitor Radio and then Babbittville Radio. And the fascinating part was, I just ran into a guy at a race up in Lake Paris the other day, and he goes, I used to listen to your show every Sunday night, and we got really crappy reception inside the house out here, Riverside area. So I would drive. I tell my wife I need to go to the grocery store every Sunday night, and I would drive down and sit in the grocery store parking lot and listen to the show. Because it's not like you go online and just listen to it. Back then, it was this was a few years after. This was a few years after that. Riding my bike at a place called Fiesta Island, which is where triathlon started here in San Diego. It's a 4-mile one-way loop that's where the original triathlons were. And the first triathlon in September 1974. And this woman, every time I would ride by, she was running in the opposite direction, and she pointed her head. And I'm like, eventually I stopped and said, what are you doing? She goes, I taped your show on my cassette player, and I'm listening to your show. And I was like, wait, people can actually listen to the show whenever they want? They don't have to be in San Diego or Orange County to hear it was like, oh my God. This could be cool. It just blew everybody's mind. And that, so private equity purchased us in 2008, and we became the Competitor Group, and we had 7 rock and roll marathons, 7 Muddy Buddy Ride and Run series events, 4 women's half marathon series events, Velo News, Triathlete Magazine, Inside Triathlon, Competitor, and then all the new media, because the new media was just getting going in 2008, 2009. And then from '08 to
Wow.
12, we went from 7 Muddy Buddies to 18, 40,000 people a year doing my silly Muddy Buddy event. And then we went from 7 rock and rolls to 34. So it was 600,000 plus people. But the main thing with what Rock and Roll Marathon did was it changed the whole demographic of running. It was 60% women, where when we first got into this back in the 80s, it was 10% women, grew to 20%. But it changed the whole face of marathoning. All of a sudden, women are out there doing these events, raising money for charity, traveling with their friends, making the expos. If you and I were going to an expo, if we spent 4 seconds there, that was a lot. Go there, get our number, get the hell out. All of a sudden, people were going and shopping. And they're going, if they're in town for 2 days, they're going to the expo both days. So it changed everything in terms of what marathons have become now. Is a lot of that is because of rock and roll.
Yeah. Wow. So tell me about the Muddy Buddy Racing Series. You said that's a pretty cool story in itself. How did that come about?
So Muddy Buddy, so I was invited, this is 1981. I was invited to do this thing called a ride and tie, which is 2 people and a horse. And the way it works is I would take off on the horse and go, 3-4 miles, tie the horse to a tree, start running. You would run up, untie the horse, ride by me. We would leapfrog our way through 28 miles. This is a 28-mile race in Lake Cuyamaca, east of San Diego. So I get a call. At that point, early 80s, I'm a running guy. I'm doing triathlon, but I'm more of a runner than anything else. And this guy's a horse guy. He goes, hey, I need a partner for ride and tie. You want to do it? I said, I've never been on a horse before. He goes, well, let's, the name's Shasta, is the name of the horse. Why don't you come on out? We'll go ride. So go ride. And, go like this. He goes left, go like this. He goes right. I'm thinking, piece of cake. They didn't tell me to start the race with a shotgun. So
Oh, my.
He's on the horse first. He rides 4 miles. He ties Shasta to a tree. And by the time I get to that tree, his name isn't Shasta anymore. It's Lightning, right? Both paws up in the air. And I'm like, oh, crap, I got to get on this thing. I get on Shasta, or Lightning, and he's now Carl Lewis. He's jumping over people. He's jumping over rocks and boulders and streams where I'm like holding on. My eyes are shut. And first 20 miles, I ran 17, right? He ran 3 miles. So now there's a vet check at mile 20 at a place where you're supposed to change. And at mile 20, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be great. Of course, I got him tired. Last 8 miles, we'll walk along. And meanwhile, while I'm on the horse, when he's jumping everything, I'm thinking to myself, this is a great concept. I got to lose the horse. And so now I go into the vet check area, and they are loading my horse into the back of a horsey corral. And I'm like, where's he going? So his hooves are sore. His hooves are sore. I've run 17 miles. Hell, his hooves are sore. Get that thing out of here. So I had to run the last 8 miles, again, thinking, gotta lose the horse is a cool concept. So the following Thanksgiving, we gathered up all what we called butt bikes, the cruiser bikes in San Diego at the different bike shops. The bikes you rent on the beach, and you ride on we have big saddles, 1 gear, old cruisers, all rusted out. So I gathered all those around, and we did a ride and tie on Thanksgiving. And I wanted to do it on Thanksgiving because everybody in San Diego at that time was doing Ironman. And everybody was pretty damn fit by Thanksgiving, but nobody wanted to do anything serious. So the idea was, I'm in a turkey outfit, and I'm hiding stuffed animals all over the canyon. Every animal you bring back is time off your total time. There's a Spam station. Every piece of Spam you ate was worth a minute. Spam on a piece of crackers. I had a guy out there, Dr. Spam. And Tinley, Molina, Mark Allen, the entry fee was 10 cans of food, which we donated to St. Vincent de Paul Center. And we actually, the first year of it, we did, I know we had signs everywhere, no permits, right? Signs everywhere, welcome turkeys, welcome idiots, all that type of stuff. And all of a sudden, 50 teams are showing up, 100 people. And then at Christmas, 75 teams. And then 100 teams at Easter, I'm in a bunny suit. and then Santa suit for Christmas. And the funny part is every Thanksgiving, I would be out there on my bicycle in a turkey suit, throwing these stuffed animals, like, and some of these animals are 6 feet tall. I go to Salvation Army and buy all their stuffed animal. And, so those might be that might be a 10-minute turkey. But who would I see every Thanksgiving early in the morning as I'm hiding these presents at 6 in the morning? Matt Keflezby, the Boston Marathon, New York Marathon champion, getting in his 20-miler on Thanksgiving morning. And every Thanksgiving, it would be, hey, Meb, hey, Bob. Pass each other. I'm throwing stupid stuffed animals. He never said anything about it. Yeah. He's like, some idiot throwing stuffed animals out in the woods. So anyways, we did this for years, and it got to the point where, I still have a storage unit with 300 stuffed animals in it. It's, I think that's
Are you serious?
Yeah. It's just the silliest thing in the world. But anyways, meeting with Bruce Pettit, the president of Brooks, this is late 90s, and talking about advertising and competitor. And, Bruce is like, Bob, listen, I can't compete with Nike and Reebok and Adidas in terms of advertising, but if you had an event of some sort, and I could use some promotional dollars, I'm in. So I'm like, well, what if we took my ride and tie, and rather than it being 12 miles, we'll make it 6 miles. So it'll be primarily fire road. And, and then we'll add a mud pit to it. So you and I are partners. I start out on the bike and go about a mile. At the mile, I've got a 25-foot inflatable with a cargo net up the front and sliding on the back. You leave the bike, do the obstacle, start running. I run up, do the obstacle, pick up the bike, and ride by you. So each person rides 3 miles, 1 mile at a time, runs 3 miles, 1 mile at a time. And then the last obstacle is a mud pit. You wait for your buddy at the mud pit. You go through the mud pit together and go in the beer garden. And then you go back and you you stay in the beer garden to encourage people to mud wrestle in the mud pit. And because it was leapfrog, now I can wear a frog outfit. So it was Mr. Frog, and we put that event on from, we grew it to 18 events and 40,000 participants, but we started with one event in San Diego. And I think I married, as a chaplain, I married a dozen couples in the mud pit over time, and it was a silly event, right? It was all, I had one guy come up to me once, and he's like, dude, I might have placed in my division, but, I had to slow down there was a person on the cargo net as I was trying to climb the cargo net. I'm like, dude, this is not an Olympic event, right? You want a medal? I got a medal in my pocket. I mean, what the hell? This is called Mighty Mighty. I'm in a frog outfit, right? Well, this is not the most serious thing in the world. Yeah. So it is getting people to understand that it was not a serious thing. And Muddy Buddy became, that was one of the reasons we sold the magazine, because Muddy Buddy had caught fire. We had like 6, 7 events, and I knew that to continue to grow, we needed to do 5, 6, 7 all at once. I needed to get up to 13 or so events for it to become a truly national series and keep people like Spartan and Tough Mudder, who came afterwards, from gaining traction. We had Money Buddy through 2012, and then we sold again to another private equity firm, and eventually Money Buddy got shut down, even though I still think it plays. It was so much fun. We had the best time ever. The great thing was the bikes. Your bike could have not seen dirt ever, right? The people who pulled out bikes that hadn't been around since Reagan was president, right? Because it's all fire road and it's flat, and anybody could do it. That was a cool thing about Muddy Buddy. And then we had a costume contest, and we had the Dirty Nurses, and you can imagine where the costume contest went. It was pretty wild.
Oh boy!
But so Muddy Buddy was one of my favorite things. We actually, I've got my our theme was, we had the frogs, and it was Be Somebody, Buddy. It was very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with Muddy Buddy, you think you could ever bring it back?
Oh, totally. It just takes, like when we first started it, it was Brooks funding it, right? And over time, we had Columbia, we had REI, we had some major sponsors. The main thing was the company was making so much money from rock and roll. I mean, the rock and roll marathon series with, you've got entry fees, you've got your own merchandise, you've got sponsorship, you've got expo. There were so many different revenue streams from rock and roll. They told me, listen, we make more from the photography at Rock and Roll Las Vegas than the entire Muddy Buddy series, or that's what we're going to focus on. I'm like, well, and my philosophy of business has always been that you hit singles, doubles, triples, and homers, and you don't want to eliminate any of that. Some things might not make as much money, but they might be just as important to the culture of the company. Muddy Buddy was really important to the culture of the company because it was hilarious. Everybody who came to it just loved it and fell in love with it.
Yeah, wow, what a story. So after you finished the Muddy Buddy and you kind of sold the private equity, what was your next step in the world of journalism?
The next step was we while we were at when we were Competitor Group in 2009, 2010, started Breakfast with Bob from Kona. And then in 2012, we sold again because we had grown so quickly. Private equity is always about foot on the accelerator, grow, 4 or 5 years and sell and get out. So they sold again in 2012, and I left in 2014. When we first sold, we had 22 employees. Now there's 500 employees and a 50,000 square foot warehouse. It was a different thing. And so I launched everything kept my radio show. It became Babbittville. Had Breakfast with Bob. And then, Breakfast with Bob started in Kona. And then over time, we've taken it to Bahrain, Dubai, Denmark, Challenge Roth, all those different places. So it's the Breakfast Show is wonderful because I get to chat with the world's greatest athletes who have the greatest stories. And that's my favorite thing is chatting with the athletes. We actually go up to Alcatraz on Thursday, doing a fundraiser for CAF on Thursday night with Jan Frodeno and with Ashley Gentle and with Alistair Brownlee on Thursday evening. And then they race on Saturday. So it's going to be a fun week.
Yeah. So is there anybody in the world of triathlon that you don't know?
That I don't know. Well, a lot of the ITU athletes is a lot of the new Olympians. Or last year, I was fortunate enough to be able to do interviews at Super League Malibu, and got to meet a lot of folks I had not met before. I mean, sport is in great shape. It's what PTO has done. I know there's a lot of athletes now who would not be in the sport if it wasn't for what PTO did. The investment they made in the athletes when there was no racing is something people should always remember because they've given. I think what PTO did, one, they put an emphasis on the pros, and that emphasis is now followed by Ironman. Ironman now created their pro series, which is wonderful. So if you're an athlete, you could be an Olympic distance person, Olympic format, move on, and at the same time be involved with Super League, which is phenomenal racing and really good dollars for the athlete. And then after that, you go to PTO/T100 and race there. And at the meantime, 70.3 in full. Well, what I love is the fact that if you are a professional triathlete right now, you don't have to do an Ironman, right? I love Ironman, but I think if you look at the number of Ironmans that people do, a lot of the pros, when they're getting to 25, 30 Ironmans, there's a point of diminishing return there. And I love the fact that, a Sam Long could go years if he wanted to, or an Ashley Gentle, number one in the world, without ever doing a full. I mean, Sam obviously has done a bunch of fulls, but I like the fact that you have longevity. And from a media perspective, when there's longevity, you have rivalries. You've got Sam and Lionel and guys like that. And you want to see those rivalries at shorter distance racing because it's not as impactful as not just the Ironman racing, but all that Ironman training, those 6 and 7 hour training days. Again, point of diminishing return. You're not going to last as long when you're doing too many long races.
Yeah. I've only been a part of the sport now for about 5 or 6 years, and it's grown tremendously, and changed tremendously, especially post-COVID, in a way that I didn't even know was possible. So yeah, it's been a pretty amazing experience to sit back and witness, even from an age grouper standpoint. It's been quite a thing.
It's the best sport. I tell people all the time, it's what's great about the sport. And that's obviously where CF started was with Ironman. But it's an equal opportunity abuser. It doesn't care if you're overweight, if you're tall, if you're short, if you're missing a body part, if you're in a wheelchair. get from point A to point B, you're a triathlete. It's pretty simple,
Yeah.
which is what I love about it.
Yeah. So when you started into this world of journalism, triathlon, and kind of moved forward, did you have any aspirations or dreams or thoughts of where you might end up?
None. No, what's funny, people talk 5-year plans and things like that. I've always been more about being nimble, having a company that's small. That's one of the things that I think hurt when competitor group became so big. You couldn't be nimble and react to what's happening out there. And I think that being nimble is really allowed us at CAF. And when we had Muddy Buddy, you seize an opportunity. All of a sudden, an athlete has done something really cool, and you invite them to do Muddy Buddy, and then you create media around it, and it all happens momentarily. Not getting a group together, not having we better get our board of directors together and make a decision. That'll happen in about a year. You need to be nimble. And that's really one of the reasons I left and started my own thing is I can, if I want to do Thank God I'm Not Racing Party, I'll do a Thank God I'm Not Racing Party. If I want to, if we want to, we just had a young man who became the first Division I baseball player to play baseball at East Carolina University with a prosthetic leg. And we were able to, to really I created a Super Bowl ad that just aired in Greenville, North Carolina, on a Sunday, of Super Bowl Sunday. And 5 days later, he became the first baseball player with a prosthetic leg to play Division I baseball. And that ended up on SportsCenter. And the next night, it ended up on World News Tonight. And now every game that his name is Parker goes to, there's families of kids who are amputees there to get photos with him because he's become a star. He's become their role model. Now that doesn't happen if you're not nimble, right? It's like, okay, this has happened. Let's react. Being able to react, being able to plant seeds and make things happen now is really what it's all about. To me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Tell me about the Challenge Athletes Foundation that you co-founded. When was it inception? And you've obviously had a heart for these things.
Well, it's funny. Even before CAF, when I first started competitor, I met a guy who was a wheelchair racer named Jim Canal, who would go on to win Boston 5 times. Well, he was a Olympic Charles pole vaulter who was hit by a car when he was on his motorcycle going to class, going to a workout. And Jimmy, there was something about him because I was interviewing runners and cyclists, and the personalities just weren't there. The stories didn't have the depth that I wanted. And that's one thing that Mike Plant taught me as well. You can write a story and try to cover every angle of it, or you can go narrow and deep and just say, Seth is a feature here, and I'm going to find out everything there is to know about Seth because I think my readers will appreciate it because they get to know somebody. So anyways, I decided to do a cover feature on Jim Canal. Nobody had ever put a wheelchair athlete on the cover of a magazine before. But there was something about him. He's racing a Dalmatian skin suit. He'd go up to the race directors after a race and go, hey, I was the first one across the line. Where's my effing money? Right? And they'd be like, well, this was a running race. Yeah, so what? I'm in the running race. I signed up. I paid my entry fee. So off, I'm in a wheelchair. So it's like I'm interviewing him in this house, and I see a nickel on the floor of his house. And your first thought is, oh, my God, the guy dropped the nickel, and he'd fall out of his chair if he's trying to get the nickel off. So I go to pick up the nickel, and it's glued to the floor. And I look up, and Jim Canov is drinking a beer, looking at me, and he's going, so Babbitt, you didn't think the poor guy in a chair could pick up a nickel off the floor? Here's lesson number 1. Don't ever underestimate anybody. And I was like, lesson received. I get it. And then that's what I started. I put on a wheelchair criterium in downtown La Jolla. It was part of a bike race called the La Jolla Grand Prix. And what was so cool about it is we had our top wheelchair guys racing, but we also brought in a flatbed truck and put it at one of the corners and brought in rehab patients from Sharp and Scripps Hospital. And the idea was that they would get to see these folks racing. I remember interviewing one of the athletes up on the, one of the rehab patients, and saying, why is this important? And his words were, it's important because I might not ever get to where they're at, but I need to know it's there. And I was like, you know what? Exactly. You need to know what's possible. So with us, this is a number of years after we started Competitor, but in actually this his first injury, Jim McLaren was a football player at Yale in 1985, offensive lineman, 300-pound guy. He was taking acting classes in New York, going to school on his motorcycle, gets hit by a bus, around 90 feet in the air, dead on arrival. Um, Ends up losing his lower lip and comes back from that to run a 3:16 marathon and go 10:42 in Kona, which is where I'm at. 10:42 with a prosthetic leg. Not a high-tech prosthetic. We're talking one step up from Captain O. So I meet Jimmy. I'm doing articles on Jimmy. He's traveling the world. He's sponsored by Budweiser. Everybody knows who he is. He's the Babe Ruth of amputee athletes. 8 years later, he's racing in Mission Viejo here. A van goes through a closed intersection, hits him back with his bike, propels him headfirst to a pole. A guy who was already in the amputee becomes a quadriplegic. 2 times, hit twice. And so myself and 2 buddies got together, and the whole idea was we want to put on a little trot bottle code. We're going to raise 25 grand and buy Jimmy a van with hand controls to give him in defense. That was it. We raised $40. And we're like, great, we got Jimmy the van. Job done. Wow. 3 amputee women come up to us. We're here because of Jim. He got us into endurance. But did you know when you get injured, your health insurance covers a walking around leg or an everyday wheelchair? Nothing to do with sport is covered by insurance because they consider sport a luxury. Everybody who's watching your show knows that sport is a huge part of who we are and what we do. It's not a luxury. So that's what if you got our 501c3 and decided someone needed a piece of equipment or training or travel to stay in a game of life through sport for forever and a day and be there. And now it's been 30 years. And we raised $178 million and sent out over 48,000 grants to challenge athletes in all 50 states, 73 countries, and more importantly, 105 different sports. We just sent out our 105th sport grant to wheelchair pickleball. That came out about 6 months ago. Yeah, so it's been wonderful. And having Rudy Garcia Tolson's double above knee amputee, who's won the 5 Paralympic Games. We started working when he was 7 years old. First double above knee to finish an Ironman, finished Ironman Arizona. Now he's 35 and he works at TAF. And then puts on our clinics for wheelchair skateboarding, for adaptive surfing. You know, just seeing our athletes give back is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really neat. How big is the organization in terms of like hands on deck that are working on the grants?
We have 25 in San Diego, and then we have in San Francisco. We've got 2 people up there, 2 in New York, and then actually the Albertson Foundation, the grocery chain, they reached out to us about 4 years ago, and they're based in Boise. And they said, we've been following you for 5 years. We want you to bring adaptive sport to Boise, and we'll fund it to the tune of 7 figures. And so we started doing wheelchair basketball and started doing sled hockey and all sorts of different clinics. And a few years later, they said, we think it's time for a field house. I'm like, well, what's a field house? Well, we just bought 7 acres of land, and we're building a 55,000 square foot, $60 million facility for challenge athletes that opened up about 5 months ago. And it's amazing. It's got wheelchair. It's got dorms. It's got a hyperbaric building, gymnasium, pool with a ninja course above it, rock climbing walls. It's state of the art and unbelievable. But then when somebody sees your vision, identifies with your vision, and amplifies your vision to the tune that they have done, it really makes you feel proud of what you started.
Yeah. So you've done so many things. We've talked about the different magazines, the Challenge Athletes Foundation, the racing series. You've done over 300 triathlons, several different Ironmans. You've been a part of a lot of these introductory moments when these sports are coming to being. You've obviously done a lot. I'm curious, is there anything that you haven't done yet that you would like to do?
You know, there's a movie out there that needs to be made on Navy SEAL Carlos Maleta and motocross superstar David Bailey. I've written their story a number of times, but they raced Kona 98, 99, 2000. And just that whole I can see the visuals of Bailey on the motorcycle back then before he was paralyzed. Carlos is a Navy SEAL. That story, that movie would be special. We just, in the last couple of years, we did a film. I executive produced a film called Landis Just Watch Me on a quadruple amputee baseball player, Landis Sims, who became the first person, quadruple amputee, to make his high school varsity baseball team, which was amazing. We did a film on Challenge Roth called We Are Triathletes. It came out actually in 2018, but covered the 2014 Challenge Roth event. But I think that movie on Carlos and David, because there's so much in there. It's so deep, because the two guys wanted to kick each other's ass. Period. End of story. But there was, at the end of the day, it's about David never giving up, even though Carlos killed him the first 2 years, and coming back and beating him. My favorite part when David finally beat him, as they came through the finish line, and David waited for Carlos in Kona, and I could see David whisper something to Carlos. And I said, Carlos, what did he say? He said, thank you. I said, what? And he said, thank you for pushing me to a level I never would have reached on my own. And to me, that went beyond sport. That went beyond what, when you talk about, Dave Scott, Mark Allen, it was like, when you have a rivalry, when you have somebody who pushes you, they make you better. That's what, so when you go out with your training partners, they make you better and you make them better. Steel sharpens steel. And with that, in that particular instance, with those 3 years, the wheelchair disappeared and the disability disappeared. There's two great athletes who wanted to kick the other guy's ass. And that's about as pure as it gets. And I would love to tell that story.
Yeah. So what's holding you back from telling that story on the scale that you'd want to?
The thing with movies is we've been very fortunate whether the film that Eric Cochran produced on Landis Sims. He funded it. He produced it. I helped out a little bit, but movies are expensive. They're really, really expensive. But it'll get done. Yeah. Plenty of time.
Yeah. Hit up Albertsons. Tell them you need, several 6 figures, maybe even 7.
Great idea.
Yeah. So then a couple more questions for you. What is your hope for the future of triathlon? What can we do as people who organize events, people who are athletes, people who are professional? What can we do to help further this sport?
I think the number one thing is to invest in brand new people, right? My firm belief is that over this last decade, the world has become so iron-centric, a lot of the shorter distance races have thrown away. And the shorter distance races are our welcome mat. When you talk about a 3-mile run, 10-mile bike ride, 150-yard swim in a pool, those are the events that get people to understand that they can be a triathlete. Then you can get them a wetsuit. Then you can teach them how to swim in open water. But the swim is a huge deterrent for people getting into our sport. And to me, I would love to see USA Tri investing in those type of events and paying race directors to put those things on, because that's how you get new people. And the cool part is, when you talk about the demographics of our sport, a lot of people say, it's a rich person's sport, it's male dominant, all those type of things. It's not for people with low income. Well, when you put on a pool triathlon, like the Pasadena Triathlon, it's 1,000 folks, 50% men, 50% women. And you see bikes, like I used to see at Muddy Bike, because it's only a 10-mile bike ride. You see these old bikes. You don't have to be wealthy. The events are cheap. When you go to an Ironman event, you got to freaking take out a loan. Right? You're paying in installments to do an Ironman race. Well, that's great, but we need the new people. We need new people coming in. We're what I call the endurance entertainment marketplace. And in the endurance entertainment marketplace, you've got marathons, you've got off-road, you've got gravel, you've got mountain bike, you've got triathlon, you've got all these different things. What is triathlon doing to differentiate itself, especially at the short distances? There's very few coaches out there who get called by an athlete saying, hey, I want you to train me to do a sprint triathlon. They want to get trained to do an Ironman 70.3, or a marathon. The shorter distance stuff gets, and then when these athletes are training for that Ironman race, instead of doing short distance races on the weekends, they're doing quick workouts, right? So those guys are the endangered species of our sport. Is the short distance race directors, and they need to be celebrated. They need to be supported because we need, and also a lot of our race directors are aging out, right? How many brand new people are coming in and saying, I want to put on events because this is a good business model, where people can drown in the swim, crash on the bike. I mean, it's a tough sport to put on, and we've got to make it financially feasible. I've always said, when you have race directors driving a Bentley, then we know we're in the right place, right? We know that the athletes things are going the right direction. Not the Ironman. Yeah. Those guys are already driving Bentleys. When you're talking about the shorter distance race director, when those guys are doing well and they're adding more events, then we're doing the right stuff.
Okay, good advice for all of us. So then, in my final question for you, you've seen a lot of people, obviously, especially through CAF, who have overcome some enormous odds to be able to do something and have made the impossible possible. There's a lot of people out there who I've met, friends, family alike, who whenever, they hear about an Ironman or they even hear about a sprint triathlon, they're like, I can't do it. So for anybody who has the mindset of, I can't do it, and they're lacking that belief, where do they find that belief?
Well, I think they find that belief, and that's where I think a lot of when people go to an event or they're standing on the sidelines and they're thinking, I can never do this, and then they see Rudy, who was a double above knee amputee, run by, they go, well, wait a second, that kid can do this? I can do it. I think a lot of people gain energy and they gain hope from seeing our athletes participate in these events. For me, the key is that you can't ever force people to do this. Like we talked about our buddies who have alcohol issues or smoking issues. You're never going to stop until you can't help them stop. They got to do it on their own, right? So in terms of sport, what we can do is provide great role models for them to see somebody who's in a wheelchair or somebody who's missing a body part and how much sport means to them. I think people underestimate the power of sport to change lives for the better. There's nothing better. You keep people off medication, you avoid spiral and depression, you get people to realize that other people believe in them and that there really are no limits to what they can accomplish. If you go to our YouTube channel and pick out any of our CF stories on Jamie Whitmore or Parker Bird, you'll see perseverance, you'll see people overcoming and then taking that to the next level. And when people are watching who have not gotten into our world yet, it's like, what the hell are you waiting for? We see Ironman and think you need to be an uber athlete to do it. The reality is that of course nowadays it's different. But when I was growing up, if you had a paper route and you wore arm floaties and played capture the flag, you've got our skill set for being a triathlete. All right? That's all you need. You don't need to have any uber skill set. You don't have to have hand-eye coordination. You just need to be able to, if you run a little, ride a little, and swim a little on a daily or every other day basis, you'll get better. And you'll be able to go and do whatever the hell you want in our sport. And that's, that to me, there's no greater sport. When you're a kid and you get a kid into this sport, and think about how hyper all of us were as kids. And you get in the water and you're swimming and you're going, oh, first you're scared, then you're feeling great. Then you're like, oh my God, my arms are heavy. Oh, you're done. Then you're on the bike. And it's like, oh God, I'm not comfortable. My seat hurts a little bit. Oh, I'm feeling good now. Oh, I'm done. Then you get in a run. Same thing. Run, my legs feel like crap. Oh, they're loosening out. I'm done. And there's all this little microcosm of life in every single thing you do. And then you come across the finish line, you go to the beer garden. And I was just looking at the schedule for an event I did on Cinco de Mayo. And it's like, beer garden opens 8 a.m. That's all you need to know, right? Beer garden opens 8 a.m. You're going to be getting a great workout in before most people are awake. And you're going to be toasting your buddies to your achievement at 8 in the morning. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, you're never going to retire, are you?
No, it's funny when people talk about, retire. It's like, Why, if you love what you do, and that's the core. When I first moved to San Diego, my goal was to spend as few days as possible wearing long pants. Or if I can wear shorts every day, then I've made it, right? And then, I think I've
You
done a
made
pretty good
it.
job at that. Maybe 10 days a year I have to wear long pants. And by finding this sport that's perfect for you, that you can do forever, I always, it's the fountain of youth. There's no reason that you can't be doing this sport and going fast. If you're a runner, orthopedic reality, after the age of 50, you're not going fast. If you're a triathlete and you're 60, 70 years old and get faster wheels or a better wetsuit or now carbon shoes, you can be better at 70 than you were at 60. And, years ago, we had a guy named Bill Bell who first got into the sport when he was 55. And when he got to 70, he called me up and he's like, Bob, all these races, it's 60 to 65, 60 to 64 age group, and then 65 plus. I'm 70. I can't compete with these 65-year-olds. So I called USA Triathlon. Okay, they added 70, 74, 75, 79. And then every time Bill would age up, now they have 90 to 94, 95, 99, right? And that's our sport is the fountain of youth. You can do it absolutely forever. And now if you can't run, you have aquabike, right? You're swim bike done. You do the swim, you do the bike ride, and you put your sandals on and go get a beer. So our sport is a sport that will keep you healthy for the rest of your life.
Amen to that. Well, Bob, thank you so much for doing me the great honor of jumping on and tell me just a little bit about your story. I thought I had enough questions, but I think I need to refresh and go back and find more because there's so many things we didn't even get to touch on. But I truly appreciate your time and thanks for growing this sport from before I was born and making it into something that I can enjoy and so many other people can be a part of, like you said, and find this fountain of youth. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Seth. Appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully I didn't bore everybody.
Thank you so much to Bob for coming on and sharing just a little bit of his story and all of the amazing things that he's done. He's been all over the world doing Breakfast with Bob. His foundations that he's been a part of have been wildly successful, as well as the different races and things that he's put on all the way back from helping kind of cement the formation of Ironman and also just so many other things. What an inspiring guy. Thank you so much, Bob, for coming on. If you made it to this point in the podcast, just want to say thank you so much. Wherever you're watching or listening, if you don't mind dropping a comment, asking a question, giving a thumbs up, a like, subscribing, reviewing, any of those things really helps us to continue to grow this podcast and just the ecosystem it's created and the community it has. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to stay in touch with us via email and be in touch about giveaways and things like that, you can go sign up at the stupidquestions.show website. And without further ado, I guess that is it for this one. Thank you guys so much for jumping in, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.